welcome to the Midnight Watch. I'm Eric Gilbert, and tonight we'll be finishing a discussion regarding government continuity during times of national turmoil. But before we get started, I'm going to need you to go ahead and hit all the buttons for me. Hit the like and the share buttons, and if you would, hit that subscribe button and help me build up the channel a little bit and turn this into a thing. So, government continuity. Where did we leave off? All right, so last night, as I said, we were talking about government continuity and what exactly the U.S. would look like if everything just went to heck in a handbasket, really. If the federal government just either collapsed for whatever reason, natural disaster destroyed Washington, D.C., or corruption took down half to 3/4 of our federal government, what would that look like? And what does that mean for the American people? And so I think we had a pretty good program last night in discussion about what that would look like. And of course, as a professing Christian, I do like to put things in a biblical perspective. Now, I had a different kind of take on that last night. I brought up some verses from the Bible about bad government, about corrupt government, and what that means from a biblical perspective. And yes, the Bible does cover that. I've said it many times that there's really nothing in this life that can't be covered by something found in the Bible, right? There's always going to be something there that God has for us in terms of how to exist. This is His creation, and things were set up. Everything is set up in terms of how it would look from a heavenly perspective. Everything that we exist in is a development of, I don't know how else to put this, like the heavenly governing system, really. Now, I know that somebody's going to listen to that and say, what are you talking about? And certainly there's no corruption in heaven and what have you. I'm talking about the way a governing body should be run or operated, the way life is lived in terms of our everyday lives for just regular people, politicians, what have you. But everything about our existence is a reflection of how existence is in the realm beyond our recognition, right? So when we're talking about governance and what have you, this is why I think Jesus, and I'm sorry, this is bugging me. Y'all have to forgive me for a moment. I don't know why this is happening tonight, but that wasn't supposed to happen. There we go. Anyway, so what am I talking about? We're talking about governance and exactly how we're supposed to exist on this planet. Now, God gave us dominion here. When He created Adam and Eve, we humanity were given dominion here. But we talked very briefly last night about the transfer of power between humanity and the spirit realm, right? That transfer of power was given over to Lucifer at the garden the moment that the fellowship between man and God was broken. Up to that point, mankind had dominion here. This was our utopia. But that disobedience, that break between us and God, there was a shift in power. This now becomes the devil's realm. This is his throne. This is his rulership. And then we talked very briefly last night, as we have many times in the past. Anybody who's followed me long enough on Facebook has heard me touch on these things many times. So the devil was banished here when he gosh, there's so many schools of thought on this, and so I don't want to get too deep because we're talking about the government continuity of the U.S. But anyway, so let me just backtrack. So anyway, the shift in power was given over to Lucifer. This is his throne. Yes, God is ultimately in control, because if He wasn't, humanity would not exist. And That's not a good thing, right? So God knows the devil hates us, but it's not even so much about us, humanity. It's literally about this battle between God and the devil. And the devil just hates God so much that he would do anything to destroy humanity because he knows it is a stab in the heart of God himself. And I don't know why that's doing that tonight. It's never done that before. Wow. Okay, so that being said, all right, let me get on track with what I'm supposed to be talking about, okay? But this is who I am as a professing Christian. I want to look at everything from a biblical perspective because that's who I am as a Christian. I speak for the longest time, when I was just making regular recorded videos years and years ago and posting them to Facebook. And then, of course, Facebook developed its live feature and what have you. So I started doing lives and what have you. But I have always spoken predominantly to Christians, but always, never neglecting the unsaved world as well, because we all have a responsibility to our existence here in this world. Okay, we all have. And one of the things that I want to say here before I get too far into my notes here, I know there are a lot of Christians who think we should not be involved in politics, right? Jesus was not here for politics. This is about winning souls. We should be soul winning, trying to reach people for the sake of the kingdom. And I do not disagree with that. Okay, that is our primary function. That is my primary function as a professing Christian. So all this other stuff that we discuss, it's really just outside stuff in terms of who I am as a Christian. Okay, this is just stuff that we can't ignore because we live in this world. But just understand that as you watch my content and my lives, that as a professing Christian, my primary function is to attempt to reach souls for the sake of the kingdom. However, as Americans, we live in an extremely unique society where we get to have a say in our government. This is, like I said, a very unique position because everybody gets, a vote. We all have our pick of the litter, so to speak. We choose representatives and then we vote on them. And I'm really not sure how many Christians believe we shouldn't be in politics at all. But in case you're one of them, just please understand that we do have a responsibility to the governing system that we currently live under. And I believe that firmly. And since we have been given this particular type of setup with our ability to vote and choose our own representatives, these are not, by the way, these are not our leaders, right? These are our representatives. They represent us, the people in Washington, D.C., and they also represent us, the people, as a country in the face of the world, right? So they are our representatives. They are not our leaders. And I don't want to get too deep into that tonight, but let's just be honest here. They are supposed to work for us, but we have granted them entirely too much power by way of just simple laziness. We vote, and so therefore I've done my thing. I've checked all the boxes. And then we let them make all the decisions. We hold them not accountable to anything. And so I started this live stream last night. This is my rebirth here. I had stopped doing my live streams on Facebook for quite a while. I don't know, a couple, 2 or 3 months or whatever it's been. And the time just got away from me, but I had other things going on. I was in the process of an upgrade here, and that was frustrating. So I just kind of let that go for a while. But now this is kind of my rebirth, and we're just jumping headfirst into a subject, and this is the first one I chose. A little bit odd for just getting back started again, but this is where we're at. So I chose this because of the amount of content that I see online, because I spend a lot of time on social media, and I see a lot of things and a lot of content, especially in regards, and this is what really prompted this subject matter for me to start my live streams on, the Epstein files. And so there's just a myriad of discussion on all sides about the Epstein files, right? And so I got to thinking, what would the U.S. government look like? What would our country as a whole look like if, say, half or more of our actual government fell prey to this Epstein list, right? We don't know 100% everything about what's going on with that yet. And we know that a lot of stuff has been released. I have no doubt that there's been some stuff either left out or redacted or what have you. I have not, as I said last night, I have not seen these documents myself, the ones that have been released. I'm sure at some point I'll take a moment to dig into that and find out, but really that's not where I'm at. I said last night that we would eventually discuss these files and what have you, but until I get information that I need to actually make a live stream off of it, I'm not just going to be talking about things I haven't looked into. But what I want to discuss is our government continuity and the safety and the protection that the American people seek from its country, from its governing body, right? So what happens when a natural disaster takes place and wipes out Washington, D.C., and where's all our politicians and what have you? So we talked briefly about, we went an hour and a quarter last night into the processes by which the government actually exists, that there are protocols in place, and supposedly they train or practice these protocols on a regular basis. So that at any given point, if something terrible and traumatic and dramatic were to happen to our governing body, our government would in fact continue. And that one of the factors that is the most concerning to the American public, and I don't blame them. I mean, why would we not be concerned about this part of things, the military? What is the military's role when the federal government begins to collapse or disintegrate, right? One of the biggest concerns that people have is, the military running the streets. Listen, as I mentioned last night, we're never going to turn into, hopefully not in my lifetime, we're never going to turn into a guerrilla-like state where the military just, does this massive coup thing, takes over the government, and what have you. That's not how things are set up. And I know right now we're under a lot of scrutiny because, or I say we, as a country, Washington, D.C. is under scrutiny for allowing the National Guard to roam the streets of Washington, D.C. and various other cities around the country. And we're terribly concerned about the legalities of that, the right and wrongness of that, whether it's legal or not. Is that right to allow any branch of our military to just roam the streets? Well, first of all, they don't just roam the streets. Again, this is not a guerrilla state. This is not we're not under martial law. So why are they out there and what have you? And they are there to assist law enforcement, right? So when terrible things happen to our federal government, the military doesn't step in a governing fashion. They would be there to essentially keep the peace, right? Assist law enforcement and what have you. And we'll talk more about that here as we get into tonight's notes. We went through a lot of stuff last night, and we're going to continue on tonight and hopefully finish up these notes so that next week when I come back, we'll talk about something else. So what it looks like when a country falls apart and why it actually doesn't. Okay? Most people imagine a national crisis like a movie scene. Cities burning, streets chaotic, soldiers everywhere. See, we just talked about that. But in reality, and I want to be careful how I say things because there's always somebody out there who's going to have some differing opinion, and obviously that's okay. I mean, and that's hopefully what I'd like to do here on these lives is have discussions about that, about things. So it's okay to have different opinions, but it's also, we talked about emotionalism last night and how emotionally driven people are, how emotionally charged people are, and how that's not good, and how that plays into the topic that we're currently on. So in reality, you probably wouldn't see a whole lot of this cities burning, streets chaotic, soldiers everywhere, martial law state, and what have you. Again, I want to be careful what I say because you see things on the news and you're like, Eric, what are you talking about? This stuff happens all the time. We're going to talk about the media's role in a lot of this as well. But the country won't look like it's collapsing. One of the things I like to tell people for years is you got to turn off the television. And in this electronics age, I got to tell people, sometimes you just got to turn off the internet too. Life was so much simpler when it was just newspapers. You know what I mean? You just come home from work and open the paper and you see some junk and you're just like, well, some nonsense is going on out there somewhere, But this internet age has brought this very almost diabolical world into our homes, into our living rooms, and right to the palm of our hands 24/7. And if you're not careful, you start to think like the entire country and the entire world is collapsing. And I got to be honest with you, just turn the internet off and the TV off and step out your door and go shopping, run into town and what have you. I mean, I don't know where you live, but in no place that I've ever lived has it been as chaotic as it looks on the internet. So I'm not saying bad things don't happen. I'm just simply saying maybe the world's not as terrible as it appears to be. Maybe. Let's see. Well, let's address comments right off the bat. Why talk about this subject without looking into it? Why pick apart leaders versus representatives? Is a topic purpose? If Epstein files include government officials' names, many of them... Well, I did choose, as I said a moment ago, I did choose this topic on purpose, predominantly because the hot topic at the moment online is the Epstein files. And so I know a lot of people's concern is, what happens if the majority of our federal government falls prey to charges and what have you. What does that look like for the American people? So that's why I chose this topic, to essentially assure the American people that there are protocols in place throughout the federal government, and supposedly they practice this stuff all the time. So whether it be natural disasters or corruption or what have you, there will always be a governing body. Let's see. And yes, absolutely, we the people want to know what's going on with our government. We want to know what's going on with these Epstein files. I made a comment last night about, sometimes the government doesn't tell us everything. I mean, it took, 60 years or so before the federal government decided to go, okay, there's aliens. And by then, of course, we already kind of had this notion that there was something more going on in Area 51 than just a bunch of campers rolling out there for a party. We're like, what's going on? And so, the government doesn't always tell us everything. And a lot of what we discussed last night was mass panic. One of the biggest issues in any governing body, in any country, isn't necessarily going to be the collapse of a federal government. It's going to be the mass panic of the people and the actions and reactions of the people. That's what's going to cause the most horrific chaos to any country. All right, so let's get back on subject here real quick. So the country, if you got any more questions or comments, please Actually, yes. Feel free to use the comment section. If I happen to look over there, I will read them off and we'll answer as we go along. So the country won't look like it's collapsing. All right. Even during a major political or institutional upheaval, the lights stay on, water still flows, stores are open, police still respond to calls, planes are still flying, and your neighborhood looks normal, right? So daily life does, in fact, continue because the systems running the country are not the same thing as the people running the country. The U.S. was designed for, I don't like the way this is written. I really don't. The U.S. was designed for leadership failure. I think more accurately, the U.S. was designed with leadership failure in mind. Because let's face it, historically speaking, there are civilizations that have collapsed, right? And people want to know, am I safe? We talked about monetary systems in the market and what have you. We talked about all that last night. The mass panic that gets created and people immediately running to the bank and to ATMs and grocery stores and gas stations, and then of course businesses begin price gouging and it's literally the people that will collapse an entire country. I mean, to heck with the government. If you want to just be able to live day to day and not have your entire existence wiped from the face of history, then just relax, right? And we'll talk about that more here in a minute. So daily life does in fact continue. Again, so I said, the systems running the country are not the same thing as the people running the country. The U.S. was designed with leadership failures in mind. So this is the part that most Americans don't realize. The entire federal system is built on the assumption that one day a large portion of the leadership could fail. It's built under the assumption that at some point in time there's a possibility that our leadership could vanish or be removed all at once. And this is why I chose this topic, was because of this mass concern over the Epstein files and what happens, when or if a majority of our government falls prey to these kind of things. My apologies. This is just, I don't know why this is doing this tonight, but it's really bugging me. So let me just fix that real quick. All right, so if you hear a loud thump, that's because that light fell off the desk. All right, so because of that, everything critical has backups, redundancies, shadow chains of command. And I'm going to talk about that here in a minute, because that's a good thing, but it's also a concerning thing, right? So shadow chains of command, emergency authorities, continuity plans, automated protocols. You're not relying on one person, one agency, or even one branch. This is partly, and here I go talking about the shadow chain of command. This is partly why I think so many were shocked when Trump actually became president. I can't remember. I think it was the second go around, right? When he was actually elected this last time. I think, gosh, I want to think back to dates and times, but I just can't. But anyway, I think we can all remember when Chuck Schumer actually said, we're just going to create a shadow government to go around Donald J. Trump. Like, he actually said that on live television, in the news, during a press conference, that they're just going to create a shadow government to run the country behind Donald Trump. And I think a lot of people just went, huh? What are you talking about? And I don't want to start a war here tonight, but, liberals versus conservatives and what have you. But a lot of the liberals were like, yeah. And of course, like I said, I spent an inordinate amount of time online, I guess. Excuse me. And there were a lot of people on the left that were all for that. And I'm like, wow, like they just said the quiet part right out loud. And there was a lot of people that were all for it. And I'm like, no, I don't care which side of the aisle you're on. You're not for that. That's not cool. But shadow chain of command in light of governmental collapse might not necessarily be a good thing, and that might be something to look into in the near future in terms of how that would actually work. How does that actually play out? So, in many ways, excuse me, we already know that shadow governing is a thing. So let's not sit here pretending that it's not, right? Let me not be the one pretending that it's not a thing, because it is, and we know it is. This is something that exists in realms that we don't speak of openly. We know what's happening, but we stay blissfully ignorant because it's just easier than to acknowledge we got a problem here, right? And I'm just going to leave that alone for now. So, who runs the country during a crisis? In a worst case hypothetical scenario, the highest ranking clean official becomes the acting president. And by clean, I'm guessing we're simply talking about somebody who doesn't have some kind of weird charges already currently pending on them or what have you. That doesn't necessarily suggest that it's going to be somebody that we like. It just means somebody who is capable of running the government without something sneaking up on them, some legal matter or what have you. Okay, so somebody clean can run the government. So when I say that it's not necessarily going to be somebody that we like, let's just face it. This country is in just a total uproar right now over Donald Trump because let's face it, half or better of the country just doesn't like the man. And heck, half or better of the country didn't like Biden, didn't like Clinton, didn't like Obama. Many people didn't like Ronald Reagan, the Bushes. We're going to leave that one alone. I got my, the Bush family. But anyway, so there's always going to be a side of the country that doesn't like whoever's in charge. But as Ben Shapiro would say, facts don't care about your feelings. Darn your feelings. Right now, this is just simply about running the government, right? We're in the middle of a governmental collapse of some kind, a crisis. So somebody's got to run the country, right? Excuse me. So in these worst hypotheticals, they're just going to find somebody with the least amount of problematic issues in their life to run things, right? So emergency appointments immediately refill the Congress, and states temporarily fill the Senate. The judiciary recognizes its caseload, okay? And federal agencies continue operating because career civil servants, not political appointees, do most of the day-to-day running of the government anyway, right? So continuity of government protocols ensure continuity. And let's just be clear here for a moment. None of this is saying there isn't going to be a pretty severe level of upheaval. Last night, again, we talked about what that would look like out on the streets, right? And even though we want things to stay, peaceful down here, but we also know there's always going to be a faction of society that's out there rioting, looting, burning, and wreaking havoc in the streets. But again, if you keep your nose in the internet and on television, you would think the entire country was on fire. Is it a lot? Yes. The damage created by these riots are in the multi-millions of dollars, and they're on a couple of occasions have run into the billions in terms of repairs and rebuilding process, simply because people use moments like this as an excuse to pillage and plunder and run roughshod over neighborhoods and communities. And let's just be honest, that's what happens. And if you're one of those that does that sort of thing, we're not going to make any apologies for the way we address that. That's just the way it is. You run roughshod over these communities, and I can't think back. If somebody can If somebody can actually think back to a time when rioting and looting actually did something to affect a positive change, then please let me know. By all means, please let me know. Because up to this point, I don't believe that any of that has ever affected a positive change within our government, whether it be local, state, or federal. No positive changes have ever been brought about by rioting and looting. So really, those are just excuses for people to run crazy in the streets and just do nonsensical things. Excuse me. So, but it would most definitely be a disaster during a time of crisis in this country. And there are going to be places all across the country where, law enforcement is overwhelmed. So National Guard is going to have to be called in and what have you. And then, of course, that's going to upset the people that are still sitting at home watching all this take place on the news because, oh my gosh, we got the military running the streets now, and that's not constitutional. And then, of course, I talked last night a little bit about the internet. Sometimes I honestly believe that it was just simply a mistake to give the internet to the everyday American citizen. Sometimes I believe that because we're living in an era now where everybody's a professional on everything. Everybody's a lawyer. Everybody's a constitutional lawyer. Everybody's a professional on what judges are supposed to be doing. Lower level judges, Supreme Court judges. Everybody's a professional on what law enforcement's supposed to be doing. And everybody's running around making posts and comments online about that's illegal and you should sue them and yada yada. And wow, by golly, if there were that many professionals capable of actually running this country, maybe we wouldn't already be in the mess and fix that we're currently in. But hey, be that as it may, it would definitely be a scramble getting things put back in place. So let me not pretend, simply by, trying to keep people understanding, the government has protocols and plans in place in case of emergencies and what have you. Let me not pretend like everything's going to be fine. There's going to be some upheaval in the streets. There always is. But, let's look back. Okay. It's everybody else's favorite topic, too. Let's look back at the whole January 6th event, if you want to have an idea on a smaller scale of how something like this would look, right? I mean, if we're to be honest here, that was a total poop show, if you'll excuse me, right? Was it not? And the people responsible for keeping it together simply did not. The people that were in charge of making decisions during those times when protocols needed to be in place did a lousy job at essentially protecting themselves and the American people. And that I don't want to get into all the theories about what happened. And we already know, like we were saying for the longest time, there were people in that crowd that should not have been there. FBI was in there and what have you, and everybody was like, "You're a conspiracy theorist. You're just a crazy right-wing Trumper," and all the various names that they have for us, MAGA Nazis and all this nonsensical stuff. And then guess what we found out this year? Over 20 FBI agents were in the crowd inciting all of this, right? And I don't know where we're at with that. I don't know if, that investigation has continued, but yes, it's one of the things that actually kind of sucks about being a conspiracy theorist is more often than not, you're right. And I can't think of the number of times over the years that I've said things either in videos or on lives while I'm on Facebook and ended up being right. And I don't really care anymore what people say about me or to me because I usually end up being right anyway. It's very seldom. I think there was twice. I don't know if anybody remembers this, but back years ago, there was some issues about this Jade Helm training. and some stuff that was going on during, some military exercises. Now, I'm not 100%. Now, I said some things back then that I had to take back. I'm like, you know what? I was wrong about that. However, I'm not willing to 100% concede to me being wrong, because there were training tactics taking place back then that were questionable at best. And that's all I'm going to say about that. I don't want to get on that topic anymore, because we're not talking about that. That was years and years ago. But that was not something that was just a one-time event. This is something that they practice on a regular basis. So, but maybe we'll talk about it another time, but this is not the time for it tonight. So, but anyway, once in a blue moon, I'm wrong. I'll admit that. But anyway, the country would be run by whoever remains untainted in the line of succession, and by the massive bureaucracy already in place. So the real aftermath would be more social, not governmental. Where things would get ugly would be, for starters, public shock, right? What's public shock actually look like? What does that mean? In continuity of government planning, public shock refers to the psychological and social impact on the general population when sudden, large-scale, unexpected events even hit, right? It doesn't matter whether the event is a mass arrest operation, a major political collapse, a corruption exposure, a terror incident, a communications blackout, or any rapid shift in national leadership, okay? Doesn't matter. The first threat to government planners or planning isn't violence, it's the mental and emotional reaction of the public. And this is why I continue to say, and I said it last night, get control of yourselves and your emotions. People are entirely too emotional. We all have emotions. We all get upset about things. We've all maybe said a thing or two that we shouldn't say, or, just in everyday living. But I'm talking about on a grand scale, excuse me, when things happen that we don't like within our local, state, and federal jurisdictions and what have you, things happen we don't like. And so all of a sudden people immediately run into their emotionalism and react. And that's where the problems actually begin. It's not even the governmental collapse or whatever's going on. It's that psychological effect of what happens to people when they see something wrong. The emotionalism immediately takes place. So why? Okay? Because public shock becomes the driver for everything that follows. What public shock looks like in the real world or real world behavior. So here's a list, right? These are things that are grounded in real historical patterns, DHS continuity documents, and psychological response data. Okay, so the stuff that I'm about to talk to you about isn't stuff that I just made up for the sake of, making a live stream. This is actual data, right? Things that are actual documentation for what we're talking about. And as I go down the list, let's have some quiet contemplation of current events and actions since Trump took office this second go around, and see if maybe we might not get even a base idea of what actual major catastrophe would look like. I mean, just dealing with the fact that Donald J. Trump took, the presidency, that he won, and now he's in the White House, and everybody's very emotional. So I'm going to go down this list, and I'm going to read these notes that I've put together regarding these DHS documents and psychological response data, and I want you to see if some of this stuff isn't very familiar to us, okay? Number one is confusion, okay? People don't know what's real, and rumors spread faster than facts. So fake screenshots, viral misinformation, and emotional reactions are immediately going to be one of the first things on the top of the list of stuff to happen, right? When we talk about rumors spreading fake screenshots and viral information, we see this online, social media, every day. especially now with the onset of AI. It's become increasingly faster and easier to spread misinformation because it's easy to just get on AI and just take a moment to have, a stupid meme drawn or a cartoon of something or even something that looks real. And it's almost difficult to tell anymore unless you're really paying attention whether or not you're looking at an actual press conference or an actual, is this actually the president talking or whatever. So you got to pay attention to what's going on and make sense of what you're hearing based on what you feel like you already know of these politicians or the president or law enforcement. Does this sound or look like the kind of thing this person would actually do? Right? Well, there's always arguments, about, well, Trump already said, this, that, and the other thing. So I really, but your feelings don't matter. Years and years ago, back in the early 90s when I was in the military, we had this sergeant that used to say, it's all mind over matter. I don't mind, and it don't matter. The heck with your feelings and your emotions. Pull yourself together and think, right? And even if something is so hokey in Washington, D.C., long before that ever takes a negative effect on the American people, it's going to be the American emotionalism that destroys us from within. So these fake screenshots, viral misinformation, and emotional reactions is going to be the first cause of confusion. Because let's be honest here, and I'm very discouraged about this because these people live amongst us, they work with us, they shop with us. It's these people that will purposely design misinformation and spread it because they think it's funny. And then when you say something about it, like, dude, this isn't funny at all, and then they laugh and they put their stupid little laughy face emojis and what have you in their comment section. Well, look who's triggered now, all this nonsense. And this is the kind of people that we live amongst. You know what I'm saying? So let me move on. Number 2 is denial. All right, so you got confusion, then you got denial. Large segments simply refuse to believe the event is happening. And I've had this happen to myself, being online, making comments about things, and end up getting like, you're lying, that's fake, that's just right-wing propaganda. All right, so denial is a protective mechanism because let's face it, sometimes when junk's going on, we don't really want to know. Just as a prime example, let me give you an example, a little bit off topic, but just an example nonetheless. Years and years ago, I was driving truck, right? And I used to deliver some certain types of products to places that would produce the food that we eat at fast food restaurants and some of the stuff that we get in grocery stores and what have you. And I'm not going to get into that tonight as to what kind of materials, because I've already said this stuff before on Facebook years and years ago. But I was like, you people would not believe the garbage that we eat on a daily basis. And then I would tell them, look, I just delivered such and such to, let's say, KFC and Taco Bell out in lower West Virginia. There's a plant down there that, I don't know, they might produce the breading for the chicken or something. I don't know what they produce, but I know that I delivered a particular product to go in there and to be ground up in these giant, oh my goodness, I couldn't believe the size of these machines that would grind this stuff up into like this fine, super silty-like material that would get mixed into flour. And it was considered fiber. And I'm like, do you people even realize what you're eating? And back then, people were like, oh, we don't care. Man, just leave us alone with our McDonald's and this. Now, all of a sudden, it's 2025, and everybody cares, and everybody's like, oh my God, do you have any idea what McDonald's puts in their hamburger meat? At this point, no, I don't care. I've been 20 years trying to tell you, hey, go to McDonald's. I don't care. I'll have a Big Mac myself from time to time. I'm I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I don't still eat out. I got a thing for Wendy's nuggets. You know what I mean? But whatever. I'm just simply saying, if you're going to act like you're surprised by the countless numbers of different cancers that we have and wonder how this happened to us, or why you can't take off the weight, why in the world I can spend a year and a half at the gym and oh God, it's just not going away. Well, you know, I mean, we all pay the price for the decisions that we make. I've got a massive sweet tooth. I'm just going to be, let's be honest. I'll be honest. I got a massive sweet tooth. I love sugar. You know, and as long as I eat sugar and drink soda, there's always going to be health concerns. So, yeah, the one of the first thing, and completely off topic here. Yeah, way off topic. You want to lose some weight, get rid of the sugars, stop drinking soda, and get rid of your desserts. There you go. All right. So denial. And then number 3 is going to be fear and uncertainty, right? Fear of what? Fear of who's in charge, right? Whether there'll be retaliation. It's always a concern, right? One of the things that the people on the right were most concerned about when Kamala Harris was running for president was a comment that she made about, I don't remember exactly how it was worded, and yes, I can go look it up. Yes, I can. Was the comment regarding something about, y'all better hope we don't get in the office because you're going to pay for everything and what have you. And then, of course, you got people like Maxine Waters and Chuck Schumer, AOC, Elon, whatever the heck her name is, and, you know, the entire squad. And they have all made comments to this effect. And now, with Trump in office, I find it comical because I have actually seen content being made and comments regarding the right now. Now they're suddenly concerned that this is how the right is going to behave towards them. Now here we are, almost a full year into Trump's second go around as the president, and people still concerned that the right's just going to try to get even with us because they don't like us, and the stinking Nazis they want to hang us all and burn us all. I'm like, where are you people getting this stuff? It says, stop the fear mongering. See, this is what we're talking about in terms of government continuity. Long before the government collapse destroys America, it's going to be the people and the panic and the over emotional responses that come to events that we just simply don't like. This isn't even about a government collapse at this point. It's just simply about a politician you don't like creating mass panic and fear-mongering, right? So fear and uncertainty of who's in charge and whether there will be retaliation, whether life is going to change. How is my life going to change because of this event, right? Is there safety going to be affected? That's a major concern. I don't care which side of the aisle you're on. We all want to make sure that our safety is secured in a country that is protected by a constitutional, by the Constitution, what have you. We all want to believe we're in the safest country in the world. We shouldn't have to be concerned about these things, but, right? So this is where people start saying, should I stay inside? Do I need supplies? Is my bank safe, right? And I'm not saying it's wrong to ask these kinds of questions. But here's the difference, right? Ask the questions. But like I said last night, keep the heart rate low, right? Let's keep the anxiety to an extreme minimum. Ask the questions, then get the responses. Use a little bit of discernment, right? Don't become emotional and just react. Number 4 is anger. So when fear has nowhere to go, it becomes anger. And people lash out online towards officials and towards each other. I mean, come on, man. Right? How much of this is what I said before I even got into this list. How much, we're not even under a total government collapse right now. And already we're seeing some of this just simply because certain factions of our country don't like Donald Trump and people on the right. Okay, so anger becomes an issue, and when fear has nowhere else to go, it becomes anger, and people lash out online towards officials, towards each other. They start making threats. They start acting on threats. We saw how people reacted towards Elon Musk and people that they thought were on the right. Anybody that owned a Tesla, oh my gosh, you got to watch where you park now, because somebody's going to flatten your tires, graffiti your vehicle, kick your doors in and dent the metal and break your windshields and all kinds of nonsensical stuff that was going on at the time. And then it was actually comical, really. I sat back here looking at this stuff online and I kind of laughed. I'm like, well, you ended up having a bunch of liberals getting online going, could you guys please stop damaging Teslas? Not everybody's a right winger. I'm a liberal and you just destroyed my car. Like, this is the problem. Yeah, your emotionalism, right? So panic buying and hoarding. We talked a little bit about this last night too, right? This is number 5, panic buying and hoarding. This is always something that happens when people lose trust in institutions. Food, gas, cash, water, ammunition. Even short disruptions create exaggerated reactions. Look how everybody reacted during the COVID pandemic. We talked about this last night, right? The toilet paper scare. I mean, it's kind of funny now, but during that time frame, it really wasn't funny. Like, you couldn't go to the grocery store and find even a single roll of toilet paper. And then it got to the point where once the shelves were being cleaned out of that, and there were like people sitting in parking lots waiting for truck deliveries just so they could be the first ones in and grab the toilet paper, right? And then when the toilet paper stopped coming, they started cleaning the shelves out of paper towels and napkin packs, right? And then all of a sudden you start seeing people popping up online having hoarded the stuff, and now they're selling it out of the back seat of their car for, $20, $30, $40 a pack for toilet paper, just gouging their fellow man, trying to make a profit on a panic. And see, this is what I'm saying. This is the kind of people we live amongst. These people live amongst us. We work with them every day. We shop with them every day. We eat in restaurants next to them every day, and you'd never know it. And now you got to look around. This is what happens. This is the panic stuff that happens when mass governmental stuff takes place, right? Now you have to start looking around, wondering who you're surrounded by, right? I'm sitting in a restaurant, and I got to, keep my head on a swivel because I don't know which one of you, nutcases is going to be the weirdo to do something crazy, right? Control yourselves. So this is always what happens when people lose trust in institutions, though. Food, the panic buying and the hoarding of food, gas, and of course the cleaning out of every single ATM from here to forever. Water is obviously water and milk, bread, things of that nature are always going to be the first to go. Ammunition, anytime dear Lord in heaven, it was a flu pandemic. I don't care. I'm not here to discuss the level of severity of COVID. I really don't care. It was a flu pandemic. And we had people out there buying up piles of ammunition, like we're scared to death that, groups of people are going to kick in our front door and steal our hoarded toilet paper. So now we're stocking up on ammunition. I'm like, this is the problem. Number 6, right? Fragmenting of social groups. What do we mean? People split. Believers, disbelievers, conspiracy factions, and political tribes, right? Again, we saw all of that during the pandemic too. Yes, we absolutely did. Anything that takes place either governmentally or religiously, you've always got your conspiracy theorists, your political tribes, you got your believers, your disbelievers, and then just as regular everyday people, we can't just simply get along, right? We just can't simply let other people be other people. And you think to yourself, we're not this way in this country. We treat each other with respect. No, we don't. And we never have. We never have. I don't want to get too far into it, but I mean, like, you know, during the like Revolutionary War or Civil War, we had such traumatic events take place in this country's history of people against people during governmental upheavals, right? Neighbors doing just terrible things to one another. You know, we don't have to get into that tonight, but all I can tell you is, like, if you don't know, go to a library, you know, or get online. You know, Google's your friend. That's what everybody loves to say. Google's your friend, you know. No, it's not really, and neither is Wikipedia, but I'm just saying, go to a library. This stuff is easy to see, and then it's very disturbing. It is exceptionally disturbing to see or to read the history of how your fellow man is going to treat you when the poop hits the fan. Like, these are, like I said, these are the people that we live amongst, that you don't even know your next door neighbor anymore. Now we're living in a time, crazy, crazy times, out of nothing more than just pure hatred for a man who took office, where people are raising the black. I got mine on the TikTok shop. Raise the black. No quarter given. You got another faction of people who are raising the red. I got mine in red. I don't even want to get into that. If you got a red flag, you can rest assured. I like to consider myself a patriot. I do. But if you've raised the red, you can trust and believe I'm staying away from you anyway. Even when junk subsides, man, you're the kind of mindset I don't want to be around anyway. Because if you're willing to take out somebody else's entire family, then you're not the kind of person I want to be around and associated with anyway. But that's neither here nor there. Let's move on. Number 7, the information overload. And yes, we're reaching the top of the hour here, but I'm gonna finish up with what I got here, hopefully, and we can talk about something different next time I'm on. Number 7, information overload. So let's see. In major continuity of government events, the information fire hose becomes the most dangerous thing, right? People are blasted with conflicting news and emergency alerts, influencers claiming inside knowledge. Oh my gosh, we're seeing all of that right now online. Influencers making some of the wildest claims. And bless y'all's pea picking hearts. Oh my gosh, one of these apps, and I hate to keep saying certain things. One of these apps, some of y'all influencers are just the worst. You know, everybody's got inside knowledge. Everybody knows somebody that's in law enforcement, or, you know, my best friend's father's former college roommate is a cop or an FBI agent, or used to work for the CIA, but they've got inside friends who told us that their friends said, oh my gosh, just stop, right? Personal theories about what's going on. There's so much of that going on. Like, nobody cares about your theories. I mean, share your opinions, I guess. Be willing to have discussion. But the problem is nobody's even willing to have discussions anymore, right? We're not even willing to have discussions. People hate each other so badly online anymore. You can't even actually have a discussion. And sadly enough, people on the same side can't even have discussions. You know what I mean? Christians, bless your hearts, you know, some of the worst. Like, fellow Christians just throwing Bible verses at each other like bricks. Can't even have simple discussions. emotional commentary about everything that's going on. Give me a break, man. So most people don't have the mental bandwidth to separate the signal from the noise. And it's sad. It's just very sad. Right? And it's not that you're not capable of it. It's just you've allowed so much emotionalism in your life over regular everyday things that when junk actually happens, that's your first go-to response is emotionalism, right? Excuse me. I'm going to be very frank here when I say, and honestly, I don't care who doesn't like it, okay? But number one, actual news sources need to just keep their opinions to themselves and simply report the news. I said this last night. I did, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart. To anybody that's an anchor person on an actual news network, just keep your opinion to yourself and report the news. Like, it's literally not your job to give an opinion piece about anything. If you're a news anchor, you're just simply here to report what's happening. Now, number two, in all honesty, I know we have First Amendment rights to speak freely, and I will never stand against that. But all these talk shows like The View, Colbert Report, John, whoever the heck, John Daly and what have you, right? These style of shows do far more harm than good, right? Their hatred and their bias taints their view. And as a result, it pushes an agenda rather than a fact-based research and common sense dialogue. That's a problem. Okay? Social media, holy crow, man. I don't know how many times I've said this. Giving internet access to the general public was almost undoubtedly a huge mistake. Like the military should have just hung on to this one, and then the rest of us could just go back to writing letters, I guess, Wow. I just remember, back in the AOL days, and I'm not saying arguments weren't taking place back then because it was an outlet. There were chat rooms back then, and that's really all it was just chat rooms, and people, chat rooms for everything from religion to politics to some weird stuff, you name it. And yes, people even argued back then, but it was just much simpler times. And I just simply remember, the early onset of, internet and the growth of it into MySpace and various other aspects, as it grew, and then Facebook and Instagram and Pinterest, and people, used to enjoy being on the internet. I mean, seriously, people used to actually enjoy it. I don't know if you remember that. Some of you may be just too young to remember a time when people enjoyed, sharing pictures of their kittens and their puppies. This is what we had for dinner last night in Pinterest. Every lady that does crafts, had their quilts and their crafty stuff and their crocheting and whatever, here's a picture of the rose garden I started, last year. This is the progress. It used to be fun to communicate with family and friends, and now it's just a frenzy. Yeah. So social media is cram-packed with opinion pieces and the deepest level of bias, pushing lies and agendas. And I'm fed up already with, the biggest one right now just being this whole everybody on the right is a MAGA Nazi, and it's okay to, and like one of the biggest discouraging things about liberals, I'm just going to say it, and you can take offense if you like it. It doesn't bother me one bit, but you're the most mean-spirited, hateful people I've ever seen in my life, that you honestly believe that other people deserve to die simply because they don't feel the same as you. And in an effort to push that agenda, you have labeled that side of things that you don't like as being not just similar to, but on the same level as Nazis. So, and you keep pushing that agenda that no matter who you are, if you're not a leftist, if you're not a Democrat, then you are a Nazi, and it's okay to punch Nazis and it's okay to kill Nazis. And that's what's going on online right now. And it's like, are you people okay? Like, honestly, do you need to be medicated and observed for a while? Because I don't know what's wrong with people. I'm like, what is wrong with you? That you would actually, and the fact that some of these social media venues are allowing this kind of content and not blocking it, not just taking it down. Like, it's literally being permitted. And it's just insanity to me. That's, yeah. All right, so I'm a little past the hour, but I'm just going to go ahead and continue for a little bit. We went an hour and a quarter last night. If you're up to it, you can stick around with me. I'm not on a time schedule anymore. I used to give myself about an hour to do these live streams, but I got notes here. If you want to stick around, stick around. If not, we'll see you next time. But why government fears public shock more than the crisis itself. I'm gonna do my best to finish this up here tonight. I've only got a couple. Well, I don't know. We may or may not. I don't know. There's quite a bit here. I may just go ahead and cut this off tonight and never come back to it because I didn't realize how many notes I had taken on this. It took me a couple of weeks to actually put this together while I was upgrading my equipment and stuff. But anyway, so why government fears public shock more than the crisis itself? Well, we're talking about all of that. So because public shock collapses order faster than the actual threat does. Historically speaking, panic spreads faster than the danger. Fear creates more damage than facts. Social media amplifies emotion and not truth because people are emotionally driven. They're emotional creatures. So social media amplifies all of that. It's just like, the internet has just become nothing more than a megaphone or a loudspeaker amplifying emotionally driven propaganda and garbage, right? And when the public panics, it can jam emergency lines, overload hospitals, produce riots, freeze supply chains, and destabilize markets. Public shock is the first domino. It's not violence. It's not chaos. It's the mental hit. It's the moment that millions of people go, wait, what's happening? When a big event hits, mass arrests, leadership changes, a political collapse, the American public reacts emotionally before they react logically. Okay? So first there's confusion, then denial, then fear, then anger, and that emotional chain reaction hits faster and spreads wider than the event itself. And people don't trust the news. They don't trust the government. They don't trust each other. So panic buying starts. Social media melts down. Groups split into tribes. One believing everything and one believing nothing. One side believing that actually both sides are always believing they're on the right side of history and accusing the other side of. The shockwave doesn't come from the event. The shockwave comes from us, the people. I don't know how many times I got to say it and drum this point home to you. That we have got to stop being emotionally driven. It's always going to be the demise of a society, right? So panic. Let's see. The shockwave doesn't come from the event. Shockwave comes from us, the people. All right, and that's why continuity of government planners fear public shock more than the crisis itself, because once the public loses psychological stability, everything becomes 10 times harder to manage, which is when you start seeing your militarized police forces hitting the streets. And then when that becomes uncontrollable, that's when you start seeing your National Guard. And the further this escalates, the more it escalates. So it becomes more panic, but then the heightened level of anger becomes greater, right? And nothing gets done when that happens. All right, so where we go? And all right, so this is why for decades I've said countless times that people need to get a hold of themselves. Get your head on straight. Think before you speak or act. I fear for our younger generations, millennials, especially the younger millennials, Gen Z. They are so emotionally driven. They absolutely cannot stand that older generations like Gen X and Boomers may actually have a point. There's actually such a level of disdain for older generations coming from the younger generations. Is like, it's a pipe down. Seriously. Gen Z, seriously, pipe down. Younger millennials, Gen Z, and whoever the heck the next one is down the line, none of you have lived long enough to really have a valid point about anything anyway. And I'm not saying there aren't some intelligent young people, because there are, but let's face it, you haven't lived enough of actual living, life living, to really have a legitimate beef or anything to say, especially when it comes to older generations. You don't have a clue what the older generations went through to get where we're at today, and what it took for the older generations to build this country into what you have and take advantage of now. Like the comments that come across social media about older generations and how they have sucked this country dry of all of its financial benefits, and now we're not going to have nothing. And back home, back then, during boomer days, a house was like $600, $6,000. I'm like, yeah, well, the economy was much different back then too. So was the pay scale. You think it was any easier for boomers or Gen X? For crying out loud, man. By the time I was 17, 18 years old, minimum wage was $3.35 an hour. Sure, gas was still 89 cents a gallon. Sure, it took $20 to fill a tank back then as opposed to 50. But when you're making $3.35 an hour, that $20 hurt. And I'm like, give us a break, man. Anyway, information vacuum and confusion. Nobody knows who's in charge. News reports conflict. Authorities delay statements, and people start making up their own explanations. And then the opinions and the theories become fact because 10,000 people said it on TikTok, and now it's got to be true. This is why I hate trends. Because and if you pay close enough attention, somebody comes up with a clever one-liner online, and by tomorrow morning, everyone's using it. And like, there's not an original thought amongst you, right? And they're like, yeah, give me a break, right? So conspiracy, chaos, and what have you on social media. Every influencer becomes a breaking news source. We got a bunch of those too, Henry Sisson and a bunch of others. Breaking news: Donald Trump fell asleep at the UN today. So did Biden. So did Bush. So did Clinton. So did pretty much anybody who struggles to stay awake during at the UN. So what? So would you if you were there. Like, could somebody just grab me a cup of coffee and a snack from the back? Send my assistant to the back and get me a snack, because this thing is going on forever. And, of course they fell asleep. So what? Well, every influencer becoming a breaking news source. Chris Valente, on TikTok. Mr. Breaking News. Whatever, fake leaks, fake screenshots, dozens of competing narratives, and people retreat into online echo chambers. The loss of trust in elites and institutions. This is important, though. This is where people say government lied. Well, of course they did. You know, it's kind of their job. Their job to lie, your job to catch them at it. And media is covering it up. Listen, anybody who doesn't know now, by now, that media is the biggest propaganda source, like we should all on every side be so disgusted. Like, not only should we be holding our federal government accountable, I believe in my heart that everybody on the right and the left should be holding the entirety of mainstream media accountable for the way it reports news. You are not an opinion piece source. That's why we've got John Daly and Colbert Report and that's The View, The Five, and all these other programs. That's why we got those. That's when we still don't give a darn about their opinion, but apparently we care enough to watch the stuff. But if you're on a news network, your job is just report the news. Can you just do that so we know what's going on? We don't care about your opinion. You want to give your opinion, go join one of those other talk show things, right? But trust collapses early, and again, long before any actual violence takes place. It's this lack of trust. Political polarization intensifies, and it's quarter after. I got to cut this off. I mean, we could literally go on and on with this for days. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and cut it out. The bottom line is, and this is really all I wanted to do was with this subject matter, was just to kind of give us all an idea of, what really takes place when the government begins. I wouldn't call it a total collapse here, but, in light of the Epstein files and what could possibly be in them and what have you, I thought maybe it would be interesting to have a conversation about what our country would look like in the face of an actual governmental disaster, just in case, right? And the big point of it all is, just making sure really that we all stay level-headed. Keep your heads about us. There's the poem "If" by Rudyard Kipling, right? If you can keep your head about you while all around you others are losing theirs, right? Keep it together. Think through the processes, and I'll be honest with you, above all else, right? Stay close to family, protect your family no matter what happens, right? I don't care what color flag you want to raise in your front yard. The bottom line is, don't go running off trying to, fight a war, run into the streets with your cardboard signs stapled to a stick, screaming for justice and what have you. Never does anything. Right. But in the case of like legitimate government collapses and corruption and various other things, stick close to family. Your family's going to need safety and security. And the best way to do that is to stay close to one another. Right. Well, I cut my family loose because they voted for Trump. Well, that's your fault. This suggestion that people on the right are so different from you simply because they voted for somebody else. Well, if you voted for for Donald Trump, then you voted for Nazi thoughts, for killing people and for killing people's rights. And it just, what? Shut up. Honestly, nobody cares what. Stop. Darn well that's not what people voted for. We're not trying to strip anybody of anybody else's rights. Nobody's, up to this point, nobody's genuinely lost anything anyways. And we could have an entirely different live stream about that as well, because I know right off the bat, somebody's ready to just jump in there and go, oh yeah, what about? What about? Yeah, that may end up being the next subject. But anyway, we got to get going. I got to get going. I got a couple of things on my end I need to get done tonight anyway. So that being said, I appreciate you being here tonight. Thank you for those of you who were watching the live stream, for the comments, and for allowing me to have the chance to address your questions and concerns. I look forward to coming up with something different next time, and we'll probably just go back to keeping things at an hour. Seems to be reasonable. But anyway, the Lord bless you and keep you. For those of you who are my fellow Christians, the rest of you, have a good evening. And thanks again for being here. Please, like I said, hit the like and the share button. Subscribe. Help me build the channel. I feel like this is a better place for me to be than Facebook. We'll have a better opportunity to build a channel here and a better opportunity to have discussions and what have you. So anyway, we'll see you next time. I'll put it on my Facebook when I'm going to be up again. In the meantime, have a great evening, and thanks again for being here.